There's been a complete silence around reporting on a recent trial to do with the Rotherham grooming gangs, the moral stain on British institutions for the last couple of decades. And I just wanted to contrast this briefly with the reporting about recent disgraced BBC News host and noted nonce, Hugh Edwards. But before I do, if you want to work with us where we're actually reputable figures and we don't do that sort of thing, there is a career
low bar, man. We're not nonces.
Yeah. Simple as.
Not the BBC.
We have a career listing for production administrator. If you're watching this at the time it goes out, it's probably still open. If you're watching it in the far future, missed your chance. However, if you just go onto our website, the careers section, look at the listing, and you think you might be suitable for that position and you want to come and work in Swindon, good to see you aboard. Anyway, look, point being, Hugh Edwards had his trial. This was covered briefly by Stelios yesterday. The other guy that provided him all of the images as well, both of them got a suspended sentence. So he had paid 1,500 quid to Alex Williams, the guy who sent him those 41 illegal images. They were some of the absolute worst material you could possibly imagine, with children as young as 7 and 9 in them. He got a suspended sentence for this, meaning he will never see prison.
On the plus side, he'll never be able to go into a pub again. Can you imagine?
Yeah. The downside is, of course, that we have seen a litany of examples recently, such as Judy Sweeney, 53-year-old care worker, who put a spicy post on Facebook and has been jailed for 15 months.
There was a guy waving an England flag who got jailed.
Yeah, there's a guy shouting at a dog as well, got 2 years. So it's pretty clear that the magistrates' courts are a political wing of the Labour Party, and they are persecuting the political opponents of Keir Starmer for ill-advised social media posts while letting actual paedophiles off the hook. A lot of coverage about this story from all sorts, lots of sympathetic coverage to Hugh Edwards about his mental health, because for some reason a bout of anxiety causes you to go and abuse children, but all right.
Well, remember, he didn't go to Oxford or Cambridge, and so he felt like an outsider, and so that's why he became a paedophile.
I'd rather him be the insider of Belmarsh, personally. But there's an interesting silence, a conspiracy of silence, one might say, around this trial. Now, this trial was arguably worse than Edwards because of the industrial-scale grooming of white working-class girls across decades in various towns and cities in the UK. This was in Rotherham, and it was only covered by Charlie Peters at GB News. There was not a single other journalist in the gallery for this, and you can probably tell why as we get into the details. There's some good news and some bad news here.
Just a quick thing. Again, Stephen Edgington. No one else would have asked the questions of Nigel that he was asking. No. Charlie Peters, none of the other journalists are interested in this. So there are many criticisms of GB News, but come on, guys. They're decent lads and they're doing the good work.
They have got a few fantastic people on staff. So well done to you gents. So 7 men were convicted of child sex offences in Rotherham in a 9-week trial that concluded last Thursday, 12th of September. The defendants were, and I wonder if you can spot a pattern here as we look at the mugshots, Mohammed Abbar, 42, Yasser Ajabi, 39, Mohammed Zamir Sadiq, 49, Mohammed Sayab, 49, popular name around those parts, Abid Sadiq, 43, Tahir Yassin, 38, and Ramin Bari, 37. So all grown men from the subcontinent with a particular religious motive.
And there's a Christian YouTuber called David Wood who
covers this apologetics.
He's so good and he's so funny, and there's this one line from him. So, what do all these Mohammeds have in common? It's so good. Sorry, go on.
That's all right. The defendants arrived individually, according to Charlie, waving to their families in the public gallery. Now, this is something you've spoken about before.
What?
There is an uncomfortable reality that these communities cover for one another. Because if you had found out that your dad was guilty of molesting children, you would never show up there again. You would never speak.
If my wife had found out that I was doing that, I wouldn't be waving to her as I walked into the court. She would disown me.
The details get worse. So the men were investigated as part of the National Crime Agency's Operation Stovewood. This was launched after 2014 with the Alexis J report. The number of convictions by Stovewood, bear in mind the thousands of girls that have been victimised by the grooming gangs, is only 33. And they've identified 1,150 victims. There is another task force set up by...
Sorry, say it again. How many victims were there?
They have only identified, this investigation, 1,150.
They've identified 1,000 victims?
Yeah. Gets worse, right?
Jesus
because,
Christ.
No, last year, in April 2023, after Charlie Peters' documentary for GB News, Grooming Gangs, Britain Shame.
Again, it was amazing.
Yep, Suella Braverman watched that.
Yep.
And so she set up as part of the Home Office, one of the only good reasons the Home Office exists, which is a National Grooming Gangs Task Force. This is something that, to Rishi Sunak's credit, failed on everything else. He did promise to do this. They've coordinated with 43 police forces in England and Wales, and they have identified over 4,000 victims in less than a year and arrested 550 suspects. So, that is the scale of the industrial rape that has happened across England and Wales, particularly by Pakistani Muslim men. This was an ethnic and religious motivated crime. This is not just general sex crimes. Over 4,000 victims identified. So, leading prosecutor Nicholas Lumley summarised the case, warning some of this stuff is going to be horrific, but necessary. He says, it took place in the early 2000s with the girls, who were aged between 11 and 16 at the time, being groomed while they were in care. So they targeted care homes. This is something that Hannah Barnes has actually detailed.
This is a repeated pattern.
Well, there's a woman that worked at the Tavistock Clinic that used to work at a Rotherham care home, and she said that the same girls, sort of same profile, the girls that were leaving care and going and getting gender transitions, were also being snuck out of the care homes, and all the care home staff knew about it and didn't do anything. So there you go. The abusers often collected the girls from children's homes in South Yorkshire. They were abused across the town, including in a cemetery, a supermarket car park, and behind a nursery. Sheffield Crown Court held how one of the girls was locked inside the abusers' homes, with one girl escaping via a window after being assaulted. The defendants denied the sexual acts against the girls, and some even denied knowing the complainants, with the women having to be cross-examined at the trial. So the court heard the victims had to time and time again carry out identification procedures, confronting each man one by one to confirm their identity. So sitting them in the room with their abusers many years on. One of the survivors, there were two survivors that delivered a witness account. One of them was in the court and she delivered a witness statement. Her abuse started when she was 11 in a primary school playground. Her abuser made her undergo a virginity test. She said, "You made me ashamed of being a virgin at 11. That same day, you sent me off and forced me to commit a sexual act. I knew it was wrong, but I wanted to belong somewhere. You monsters took advantage of my vulnerabilities. You started to pass me around as if I was a fresh piece of meat, man to man, city to city." So this is a cross-country trafficking organisation. All 5 of the men that she listed there played a part in exploiting her. She spoke directly to Yasser Ajib, and she said, "You didn't play a big part in what happened to me. I didn't even class you as one of my main perpetrators, but you're still one of my abusers." And she said he abused her behind a nursery. When she was 12, she was assaulted in a taxi until she was bleeding. She was given alcohol, cigarettes and drugs. She became addicted throughout her adolescence and attempted suicide more than once. Her phone was confiscated as she was trafficked around different towns in England. And so, addressing the 7 men, she said, "I don't want to give you too much of my time. You've already had all of my childhood and the majority of my adulthood. Was I groomed or was I a slag like they said I was? For years, I believed I was a slag. I was just a child, not a slag, nor was I a problem child. I was vulnerable and screaming for help. For years, she suffered with flashbacks, and she gets a whiff of one of her abusers' smells sometimes, or hears their laughs as they assaulted her. She wakes up screaming from nightmares, even when highly medicated. She, quote, "You took my childhood, my innocence, my freedom, my family. I was forced into children's homes because of what you did to me. Those homes didn't protect me as they should have. In fact, they made it easier for you to take me. By the time I was 16, I'd been abused by over 150 men. Her education became non-existent. She became violent and angry with the world. Quote, "You ruined my life, but I won't let you ruin my future. I'm a fighter and a survivor. I'm fighting and thriving and fighting. You can't and won't ever take from me again. 22 years ago, you groomed me. 10 years ago, I started my justice fight. You stole my childhood, and now I'm taking your freedom. I am your karma." Again, very powerful. Charlie Peters was the only one there that bothered to document this. Round-the-clock coverage for other stories.
Well, I mean, she's an English girl.
Yeah, quite.
That's why.
There was another girl who did a victim statement via a video link. She said, "All of you came into my life when I was at my most vulnerable. You all made me feel wanted, loved, and part of something I craved. Life started to feel good, as if I belonged. I was made to feel like I was pretty, that I was somebody. What I did not realize as a vulnerable child was that you all had ulterior motives. You all befriended me for reasons it would take years to understand. In the coming years, I hope you feel as lonely, frightened, and isolated as I have felt. You violated and humiliated me when I was a vulnerable child. Now it's your turn to feel as I did." Now, all of these men were convicted. And I'm going to read out the sentences for you, because remember, again, Hugh Edwards got nothing. These men involved in a countrywide operation that led to thousands of girls being raped. Mohammed Amar, convicted of 2 counts of indecent assault, 16 years imprisonment with 2 years on extended license. Yasser Ajib, 1 count of indecent assault, 6 years imprisonment, 12 months on extended license. Ramin Bari, 4 counts of rape, sentenced to 9 years. Mohammed Zamir Sadiq, convicted of 1 count of rape and 1 count of intercourse with a girl under 13.
How's that not rape? I'm not a lawyer. I don't know, yeah.
Sentenced to 15 years imprisonment, 12 months on extended license. Quote, some family members were seen shaking their heads and crying as the sentence was delivered. They were upset that he was going to prison for raping a girl under 13.
Yeah, I'm not upset about that.
Tamir Yassin, 8 counts, 13 years imprisonment. Again, this is a very weird statement from Justice Slater, who sentenced him, said Yassin was, quote, a sexual opportunist rather than a predator. How is anyone that abuses a child not a predator?
Why are we making that kind of distinction?
Not just why is it necessary, how does it even make sense? And then Mohammed Siab, 2 counts of rape, 1 count of sexual intercourse with a girl under 13, and 1 count of trafficking. 25 years, 12 months on licence. Justice Slater described Siab as a persistent and cruel sexual offender as he handed down the sentence, met with shock in the public gallery. Siab, who heard his sentence through an Urdu interpreter...
I don't mean to laugh, but of course he did.
He's been here for 20-odd years. Waved to his family as he was taken down. One of his daughters shouted, I love you, Dad, as he was led out of the dock. So there's not just conspiracy science from the media here.
Yep.
There's a reason these families have not dobbed in their own family members for doing this.
Failure of integration.
Yeah, quite. I'm sure if we just...
They'd won what with Union Jacks.
We live in a hugely divided society.
Yeah, so the families don't care about victimised children because they're white English girls. It's genuinely in-group, ethnic, religious, and familial preference, which justifies the weaponisation of sexual assault against children because they're an out-group. There's one more guy as well. Abid Sadiq, 43, convicted of 3 counts of rape, 1 count of indecent assault, sentenced to 24 years and 12 months licence. He was previously sentenced for rape and indecent assault convictions in 2019 by the same judge, who at the time described him as a cunning and determined sexual predator. Slater found he had no reason to change his assessment and worsen the sentence. Why are any of these men ever being allowed out of prison?
Why was he convicted of this in 2019 and yet somehow 5 years later he's still on the streets?
Well, why are none of these life sentences? What is there an idea that somehow they'll be reformed because of the industrial abuse of children across?
Sorry, like we've got him 2 counts of rape. Yeah, I'm sure that's the limit of what he did.
Yeah, quite. So
yeah, it's interesting that they're not tried for things like human trafficking and
only one of them was
kidnapping.
Yeah, like I mean, in the US, then it's typical to hit defendants with as many charges as possible. I mean, especially if they want to get you, they will hit you with one after another, and then you end up with a 400-year sentence, right? I mean, you could absolutely throw the book at these people. You could charge them with pretty much everything under the sun. I mean, you could, but they don't.
Yeah. The judges have been advised to stretch the law every which way but loose to convict people involved in the Southport protests.
Remember that the prisons are overcrowded. We've got to think of the logistics of the thing.
Oh yeah, we had to let people out like this in order to imprison grandmas for Facebook posts. Now, I just wanted to draw attention to the very few politicians that actually spoke about this. Liz Truss responded to it, as did Suella Braverman, because she actually cared about this issue and tried to do her best. God bless her. Charlie Peters also responded to Dan Hodges from the Mail on Sunday, who just said, I can't believe that no one else bothered to look into this. Why don't we have an independent public inquiry into this? And Charlie Peters said something rather interesting. He said, after Suella Braverman implemented this task force that led to the identification of thousands of victims, it was met with hatred, lies, scorn and derision, swarmed on by commentators, journalists and politicians who described her assessment as racist. He found it all hugely dispiriting. Many influential and powerful people were happy to trot out the bogus 2020 Home Office report and wish away the decades of horrendous abuse as basically a myth. Charlie was the only reporter in court to hear one of the victims stand up and confront her abusers 20 years after they groomed and exploited her. It was unbelievably powerful. It will live with him forever. But it was equally so depressing that no one else was sat in with me in the press gallery. And I won't hold my breath for any change in this, neither will Charlie, because something was censored from that woman's
I saw.
address. Yes. She had asked for some of the abusers to be deported, because 2 of the convicted rapists have Pakistani nationality, and they could be removed from the country permanently. So they wouldn't fill up our overcrowding prisons full of 10,000 foreign nationals. she was forced to remove this request from her statement in court. So Charlie's reporting here says, GB News has seen the original copy of the speech she intended to deliver, which has several sections crossed out due to restrictions ordered by the judge, who was granted sight of the statement before it was read out in court. The censored conclusion reads, I'd like to request that after sentencing and upon Rudy and Shoabe's release, they should be deported back to Pakistan, as this is where they originated from and came here to exploit children. Thank you. Rudy is Mohammed Ajar and Shoabe is Mohammed Saeeb, who got 14 and 25 years, respectively. Saeeb was the one who needed the Urdu interpreter, so again, integration not high on his list.
I mean, she's been brave enough confronting her rapists and attackers and speaking in court, but wouldn't it be amazing if she had left that in? If she'd said it anyway, and then the judge had been forced to, act against her for contempt of court, whatever.
Who knows what would have happened to the actual court, the actual proceedings, though,
Yes, that's...
her testimony probably would have been thrown out for contempt of court, meaning the evidence would have been withdrawn from them, which is madness, because we don't have to have foreign rapists here, and the judges are insistent on keeping the narrative that for some reason they need to not only be allowed to stay in the country, but eventually be let out to presumably do it again. So she says, there's nothing to say they'll stop exploiting children. We can deport them and let their own country deal with them. The Foreign Office should absolutely give Pakistan full punishment if they refuse to accept grooming gang rapists. Those men need to be deported, or Pakistan should have its visas restricted. Barrister Matthew Bean was acting for the Crown and said, whether the abusers remain in this country or not is up to the Home Office, and that the decision should happen regardless of what the victim should say one way or another.
Yeah, that's rather the problem, isn't it?
Yeah, I disagree with that entirely, actually. I think the victim should have a say in what happens to their persecutors. Home Office spokesman said it would be inappropriate to comment on ongoing legal proceedings. Yeah, because it looks really bad for you. Yeah. I'm just going to play one last little minute of Charlie Peters summing up this story, because he really puts in perspective the legal mechanisms that render this entire situation a choice by the government to allow these people to languish here, because they could just do it tomorrow if they wanted, and they clearly don't.
UK Borders Act, any foreign national offender serving a custodial sentence over 12 months should be deported. However, with the grooming gang scandal, there have been several cases like this where that has not happened. The most notorious case is that of Kari Ralph in Rochdale. He was sentenced to 6 years. A decade later, he's still fighting deportation, even though he's had his British nationality stripped due to various ECHR and legal battles he's put on. Now, I think this survivor fears the same will happen again with her abusers. That's why she wanted to say in court, in open justice, for everyone to hear. Thankfully, we were there to hear it, what she wanted to happen, that she wanted those abusers to be out of the country. She said that she had no confidence that after those sentences are served, and they'll serve half of them, that they will be safe to be released into the community. I should also add very quickly that under the 2022 Nationality and Borders Act, the government introduced a provision that any country that refuses to accept foreign national offenders being deported should be and could be subject to visa penalties. So the government could punish Pakistan and say, if you don't accept these grooming gang abusers, we won't let your workers come to this country. Now, I understand, my sources tell me that the Foreign Office has consistently blocked that power being used. Suella Braverman last night told me she wants that power to be used. Lee Anderson has also told me he wants that power to be used. Laura Farris, the safeguarding minister, told me in March she thought it would be sensible for that power to be used. The Home Office last night told me it would not comment on individual cases.
That's just insanity. Why would we deliberately choose to pay for child sexual abusers to be here when they don't have to be?
Well, under ECHR rulings, they can claim a right to family life. They can say that they'll be a threat if they move back home. These legal battles have succeeded, but this survivor wanted to let it known through sharing her statement with me that she wants these abusers to be deported. They're evil men, she said, and they've got to be let out of the country.
Charlie.
So they can claim a right to family life to stay in the country while they destroy people's families with their crimes. And I just want to say, well done to Charlie Peters for reporting on this. Nobody else did.
Hi folks, hope you enjoyed that segment from the podcast The Lotus Eaters. If you did, go over to lotuseaters.com, sign up, support us, only £5 a month. That's how we keep the lights on. And go and watch our Lads Hour, which is like The View for Men, in which this one the lads are discussing the classic film, Hot Fuzz. It's amazing, you'll love it. And while you're at it, go over to X, formerly Twitter, and follow us at lotuseaters_com.